What's going on, guys? I'm Bill and welcome to Bill's How To. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to fix a crack in the ceiling to make sure it never comes back. Let's get straight into it, guys. Let's do this. Alright guys, so today I'm going to show you how to fix a large crack in the ceiling. You can see here this one runs all the way along. Now this happens for a variety of reasons. It could be inadequate support, it could be poor installation, structural movement. It's a pretty common issue. What I'm going to show you today is how to strengthen it so that we never have this issue again. So the absolute first thing you want to do is quickly go up to the crack, push on either side and check and make sure that it's nice and sound. So this left side here is nice and sound. We move over to the right side. You can see just how much movement there is on that right side. It's actually dropped a fair bit. And we're pretty lucky in this case because depending on the situation, you might have access to the roof cavity up on top, you might not. So the application will be a little bit different depending on your situation. But in this case, we've got a manhole literally right next to that crack. So I'm going to show you guys how we can add a bit more support to make sure that it never comes back. Alright guys, so if we have a look up here in the ceiling, the edge of our drywall sheet or the edge of the crack is basically right on the edge of this beam here. Now, so that left side is sitting nice and secure because it's got somewhere to be screwed into. On the right hand side, that crack literally runs along the edge of this beam all the way along. You can see here there's an old screw from where someone tried to put a screw, obviously didn't have anything to bite onto, and that's why we're getting that drop in the ceiling. So an easy way to fix this is to grab any scrap piece of timber. We're going to slide that one there side by side. We're going to push it up hard up against this timber here and we're going to nail it into place. Now if you have a look, you'll notice there's a bit of a gap underneath all the way along. The reason for that is because the ceiling's actually dropped. So once we nail this one here into place, we'll be able to push that ceiling up, screw everything back into our timber here that we've now supported or installed, and that's going to give us exactly all the support that we're going to need to prevent this crack from reoccurring. So before you nail it, make sure everything's nice and clean underneath. Then we can put a couple nails through. So now we've got timber support added for the crack from right here all the way to the end of the ceiling there. If you notice there's a little return here, turns around and then continues up a different path. The reason for that one there, if we jump back up in the roof, you can see right along here, this is where the timber beam stops. Okay, and then what it wants to do is find the simplest path or the easiest path for that crack to travel in. And it just so happens that there's a joint right next to it, so the crack has traveled from here, turns around and follows that easy path all the way along. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a nice wide piece of timber, drop that right over the joint over here, put a screw on either side. That's going to give us that added support right on this joint here to make sure this never comes back. So now we can take our piece of timber, drop that over the crack, center it, make sure it's sitting nice and flat. We're going to take some screws and screw that from underneath. So a screw on either side is going to give it that added support so that it no longer is able to flex. It's going to sit nice and rigid and it's going to have that support from the timber that we've just installed. So now we can take some screws and re-secure that one back up. You can see now it's starting to pull that ceiling up. And we're just going to continue all the way along. Might need that screw. So if you have a look at the ceiling now, everything's been pulled up nicely. There are some areas that need to be scraped back. We're going to remove any of that loose material all the way along, but if you have a look now, everything's sitting nice and flat the way it's supposed to. So we're going to quickly remove any of that loose material all the way along. If we have a close look here, you can see somebody's tried to repair that one there with mesh tape. So what I'm going to do is just run my joint knife through that crack, cut all that mesh tape out of the way, and I'll show you guys why in a second. We're going to open that crack up just slightly so that we've got somewhere for the joint compound to sit into. So once all that mesh tape is now being cut and removed out of the way, I'll take my 7-in-1, 100-in-1 tool, and we're going to use that little V on the end here, which I've shown you guys in the past how to do. Run that through the crack, and what we're doing there is removing all that loose material from inside, and we're also creating a little V in our ceiling here. And the reason why we want to do that is it's going to open it up, give the joint compound somewhere to sit into, and then we'll be able to tape this one here up nicely. So remove any of that loose material. You can see there's a fair bit of loose material that comes out. Run it all the way along. And now we've got that one there ready to be filled, taped up, and if we test it out, that's completely nice and strong up on that ceiling, completely supported, ready to go. So now we're going to fill in this crack here and we're going to apply some tape. Now the tape that we're using today is fiber fuse, which I'll show you guys in a second. Rather than using a base coat on here, I'm going to speed up the dry time by using quarter cement. It's basically a quick setting compound, so we're going to fill that all into the cracks before we actually start applying our bedding. And I find in my experience that this just allows you to push everything into that crack as much as possible. So we're just going to fill that all in. Push it in on a couple of different angles. Once you've got that completely filled in, then we can take our mixture once again and we're going to create just a little thin bed over the top. Doesn't have to be perfect, we just need a little bedding for our tape to sit into. Alright, so we've now got our bedding. We'll grab our tape. So the tape that we're using today is this one right here. It's called fiber fuse. You can use any tape. You can use paper tape, fiber fuse tape, even mesh tape. I know a lot of people say that you shouldn't use mesh tape. I've used it plenty of times in the past and I haven't had any issues. Now it comes down to personal preference. This one here works unbelievably well. Very, very easy to use, lays flat. It basically absorbs all the compound straight through it. Now we've got a little bit of a twist here. So we're just going to go around that one there, lay it a little bit flat, cut across once more. Always try not to overlap your tape. Press it in slightly, that'll help it sit in place. Then once that's done, you can go over the top and you'll instantly notice that our compound actually goes through the tape itself. It absorbs it much better than paper tape. Paper tape basically doesn't really absorb very much of it, and you simply embed it. With this one here, it fuses into the compound itself. Now if you want, you can just leave it as is. Let that one there set. If you're not very confident in your work, let it set, come back, knock off any high spots, if any, and repeat the process for a second and third coat. However, I'm going to quickly go through, layer it up just a bit more because we are using quickset and it is going to dry pretty quick. That way I might be able to get away with simply having 3 coats, or I might even get away with 2 coats. So we'll just layer that one there all on. And we can bring this one here out just a little bit wider. Feather it off or smooth it all out. Try and get rid of any of those hard edges. Now we'll let this one here set. Should hopefully take probably about 30 to 40 minutes. We'll come back and we'll put on a couple final coats. We might get lucky and only have to put on one more coat, but we won't know until this one here is nice and set. So for the base coat, this is the product that I used. It was just basically cornice cement, nice and simple. It sets much quicker and harder than regular all-purpose joint compound. We're going to go over the top now because it's nice and dry using this product right here. Now this one here is a premix product. It can be used for any coat, which is one of the benefits of this product. So whether you're doing a base coat, you're doing your final coat, anything in between, nice and simple. We're going to get this one here mixed up now and we're going to finish off this ceiling. So take your joint knife, run it over the top. Make sure you haven't got any high spots. So repeat the process. This time we're going to bring it out a little bit wider. Don't worry about your finish just yet. As long as we're getting the product up onto the ceiling, we can finish that off in a second. So now that we've got the bulk of it on there, we can start smoothing everything off. Work your way through, make sure you feather off your edges, which basically is going to leave it with a nice transition. That means less sanding. Need a little bit more material on that side. Alright, so now that we've got everything tightly skimmed, we're going to let that one there dry, come back and check it, give it a light sand. If it's fine, we can then get started on priming and painting. If not, we might give it one more final coat over the top, and I'll see you guys in a bit. And once it's dried, this is what it ends up looking like. So now we can take 120 grit sandpaper, give it a light sand, especially those edges on either side. Make sure we've got a nice transition, followed by primer and then sealing paint. And once the ceiling's been painted, this is the finished product. So there's no way you'd be able to tell there was previously a crack here or that there's been any kind of repair work done to the ceiling. The upside about this is now that we've got adequate support up in the ceiling, this crack is never going to come back. Perfect little way to make sure that you repair the crack and fix it for good. A lot of people have asked me in the past on previous videos that because I filled in the crack and I've built it up, doesn't that create a lump in the ceiling or in the wall? And the simple answer is no and yes. And the reason why I say no and yes is because yes, it does kind of create a little lump or a little high spot in the ceiling, but because we've built it out so wide, there's no way you'd be able to see it physically by eye. And I'll show you guys a quick example. If we take a joint knife, put that roughly where the crack was, drop it flat up against the ceiling, and you can see there's no light protruding or coming through that top of the joint knife there. And the reason for that is because we've built it out so wide. So that there hopefully resolves that for you guys. It does kind of build it up a little bit, but you'd never be able to tell. Even if you ran your hand along the wall or the ceiling, you won't be able to feel it. You can't physically see it. So technically it does exist, but you can't see it. That's exactly the same way that you do any kind of joint in your house, any kind of drywall, plasterboard, gyprock sheet, whatever it is, whether it's a butt joint or an actual factory joint, it doesn't matter. You're going to build it up just slightly and then bring it out nice and wide so that it transitions nicely and you'll never see it again. So hopefully that resolves that, and this video has helped you guys out. As always guys, like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching Billshowto.